left them, I was assistant conductor to Bernstein in '61. We had one person of color in the orchestra, Sanford Allen, who was hired as an extra player. And it became clear over time that orchestras are pure white, and bringing black kids into young persons' concerts, they don't see themselves on stage.
And
So,
men.
huh?
All men.
Also all male at the time. When I was in the Philharmonic, there was not a single female in the orchestra. So, but we've solved that. Now the Philharmonic's 50% female, and women conductors are all over the place.
And only one black player.
Yeah.
Clarinet.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's so they were very embarrassed by this, and they started a program to, because black kids would come up from the Juilliard and the different good schools where they'd work real hard to become highly skilled, and they'd audition, but they'd be cut up. They wouldn't make it. Not enough would make it to change the complexion, literally, of what an orchestra looked like. I'm not only talking about the Philharmonic, all over the country. So they began a program where the New York Philharmonic raised the money to hire kids, good players, coming right out of the conservatories, who didn't make it into an orchestra, and assign them to an orchestra. So they have a little bit of an apprenticeship, and maybe after that, they would do better in the auditions and get the jobs. 6 were sent to me. 6 black people of color, I like to see better, were sent to me to play, mostly string players. And we of course, they played with us. I was thrilled. My Missourian orchestra, Kansas City, a lot of the players were not thrilled. Shocked to me. I thought that all musicians were liberal. And some of them did make it. Some of them did make it into other orchestras, but most of them did not. This complexion hasn't changed. Meanwhile,
let me
yes.
get Ellie in there just for a minute.
Please.
So I was interested, Maurice, in your book where you mentioned that how these concerts came up at Carnegie Hall. So it was a question of the NEA looking at Carnegie Hall saying, why are you this white institution and why don't you do something about it? So they were receptive to your proposal to bring these concerts there. With the help of a board member.
Betty Allen was there. They had a token black woman on the board, brilliant woman, Betty Allen, and she was a great friend of mine. And she said, Maurice is okay, let him do the series. They did the series because the National Endowment of the Arts was on their case. Carnegie was not getting money from them when they were really giving out money. Now they're about to erase the last vestiges of the National Endowment. So Carnegie was embarrassed by that. They kept on embarrassing Carnegie, saying, you do nothing for minorities. And so because they were embarrassed, when I brought this idea to them to do 3 concerts that had big black connections, if they weren't all black, they said, whoa, this is perfect. This is the perfect way we can now say to the National Endowment, we're doing our part. That was the reason they did it. Cynicism. It was cynicism. I took advantage of it. I did it. But I know in my heart of hearts, appropriate, exactly. I know my heart of heart where the truth is. I think you're absolutely onto it.
So I think it's important to understand these institutions for, the bottom line. So it's getting audiences, surviving, paying their bills. But the outcome of this, however it happened, of your 1989 concerts, is it just grew so many materials from that. And I think that's something valuable we need to hang on to. So maybe, Mike, you could address the New York Phil question since you were their scholar in residence, just in terms of their decisions of promoting Dvořák at the New World Symphony, or just the discussions of racial dynamics in 2017, because I continue to be shocked and I don't go hear them because I'm personally disturbed by the lack of racial diversity. And it's just in 2017, to me, it should not be this way.
Well, I'm sure you know that the scholar in residence is given complete financial control of the institution. Hire and fire people left and right. But before I answer, let me get something else.
I just had one other chilling fact about the New York Philharmonic, not to dog them, but they do have their teaching artists initiative, teaching artist fellows. These are people, cultural ambassadors, who go into largely diverse communities and educate them on classical music and these kinds of things. And not a single one of their 20-some-odd fellows is a person of color.
Yeah. Well, again, I think there are, I mean, Marcus and I have spoken quite a bit about the tensions and complexities of the idea of outreach, which is billed as something that's entirely positive but is filled with all kinds of mixed things. But before we say anything more, I'd like to throw it open to the audience and see if there are any questions and comments from people. First, we'll try to get everyone in, please.
Whether I should just use a microphone.
Sure.
I think yeah, thanks. I'll just pass it along so that everybody can hear. Yeah, good, thank you.
Thank you so much for this. As a Czech American and a singer who had a black vocal instructor, I come to this discussion with a fascinating background. I have one comment and then a specific question. We must remember, and perhaps it's good to remind ourselves, that Dvořák and more importantly Smetana came from almost 3 centuries of Habsburg rule, and they were not allowed their culture. Is there a source of humanity that Dvořák sees in the Americas when he sees the enslavement? And then specifically, he's famous for tossing folk melodies and keeping the lyrics to folk music. Is the arrangement of Stephen Foster's Old Folks at Home the only instance where he preserved the melody, if we can call that folk music? Thank you.
I'll take it unless anybody wants it. Okay, well, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, both of them, the last one's easier. It is the only case, certainly in his use of African American music. I mean, he used various Czech melodies of both popular folk and sort of serious in various works over time. But this was the only one, and his arrangement of it is extremely simple. It's very straightforward and simple.
It's literal to the piano part. Yeah.
Absolutely. To your second question, it's very difficult to say. There are all kinds of mixed things about the Habsburg Empire. One of the things that really appalled Dvořák when he came here was how little state support there was. So however he might have been complaining about the Habsburgs, he had benefited tremendously from the scholarships that he was given as a young man, and that's how not only did he get the money for them, but that's how he met this whole Viennese mafia who made his success possible. Brahms and Joachim and Hanslick, all these people, through this. So on the one hand, he understood that there was something special about the American energy and democracy. On the other hand, he was just spent his whole time here lamenting the support for the arts, and as some people have noted, there were years where Frankfurt spent more money on their opera theater than the entire United States spent on all the arts. So, who's next? I think you were. Yes, and then in back.
Hi, I was just going to ask about union involvement in terms of gender parity and racial parity. So, I mean, I'm a theater person, so in theater I'm a member of 4 different unions. And we have all kinds of involvement and rules and regulations and organizations that support diversity. So my question was really, here we are talking about the New York Philharmonic, what can be done about that and who can do it? Is that something that's done, that could be organized through the Musicians Union? Is that, because Actors Equity Association started years ago, the non-traditional casting project, all of that kind of thing. Just food for thought.
Well, one of the things that happened was carpets. Carpets. Because when women auditioned, they were usually wearing heels, and you could hear them walk, and that identified them as gender, in terms of gender, so they put carpets down in order to have blind auditions. But when you have organizations, top flight organizations, as it is in the theater, that are based on audition, particularly when they're based on blind audition, it's very tricky to figure out how you deal with that. These organizations insist that the only way they can possibly achieve that status is through these kinds of auditions. And so therefore, a union could never interfere with that. Or, not true, I guess they could, but that,
I mean,
again.
programming,
Yeah.
you know.
I
We have
think
another
the strong
question.
desire, I'm sorry.
We have another question.
I don't know if, I presume people on the panel are familiar with the now deceased for some time, Sylvia Olden Lee. She's the first African-American employed over at the Met, and she was responsible for suggesting Marian Anderson, etc. I used to drive her up and down the highway for about 10 years before she died. Sylvia played for Paul Robeson, and she had played for Roland Hayes. Now, some people may know that there was an ostensible controversy about the quality of Roland's voice versus the quality of Paul Robeson's voice. That Hayes was ostensibly a white-sounding singer, but Robeson was the natural black singer. Hayes learned all of the spirituals from his mother, Angel Moe, who had been a slave on a Georgia plantation, which Hayes bought for her through the proceeds that he raised in his recording career. Now, besides his settings of things like, like what he does with the Life of Christ and many of the other things he did, it's true that Roland's English and German and French were so perfect that people had problems sometimes distinguishing his voice from other so-called white voices. So the reason I bring this up is because there are a lot of things that get said about musicians that are not true of musicians. They're true of academics, they're true of listeners, they're true of people who come at it from the outside. And I would just say about the issue of Dvořák, my view of what happened. I believe that these two individuals, Burley and Dvořák, spent most of their time singing and thinking in music, and they didn't think in words. They also thought in words, but they recognized the words were inferior. So the exchanges, such as what was already played, when you went to the piano and you played the opening of the second movement of that issue of the chromatic interval, that's something being added in. That's something being compared with the spiritual, the way the spirituals are done. And it becomes appropriated, yes, but this is a development as profound as any development in science. These were scientific thinkers. These weren't just people who were doing so-called music. This is a profound thing. And so I just wanted to interject this because there's a tendency sometimes to try to read that time, which was in relationship to the Civil War, as far from that time as the first Iraq War is from our time. You're talking about a time when the country was traumatized still. You had racial backlash. You had all sorts of things going on. More people killed in that war. And Burley is singing to Dvořák about that. And that's what's inside of Dvořák's soul and Burley's soul, and that's the exchange.
Thank you so much. Let's go. We have one question back here. Did you also have a question, Madam?
Okay, so we're going to go here, and then we'll go over there. Okay.
Yeah, hi. I had a question, and it picks up from some of what was just said. Because I'm concerned about the lack of racial diversity, and I think perhaps an even more troubling concern is the overall cultural degeneracy that we have in the society right now and how to address that. And you see this exemplified by the shrinking and aging of the audiences for classical concerts, for music. And recently, I was at a seminar and concert. We had some discussions with several conductors of spirituals, Roland Carter and Gregory Hopkins and others that have continued this tradition. and they were discussing the collapse of the spirituals, for example, in the black churches, where largely spirituals in the traditional settings, like we were just discussing with Burley and Roland Hayes, are not done. The young singers are simply totally unaware of this. So I work with an organization called the Schiller Institute. Sylvia Olden Lee, who was just mentioned, was one of the artistic directors of that, and Bill Warfield for many years, who was mentioned earlier, was on the board. And we are going to, together with the Foundation for the Revival of Classical Culture, to rectify this situation by again working on creating not only audiences, but people who sing. Sylvia was a great proponent. She said the great voices are in the gas stations, they're the maids and the housekeepers and so on. They're sweeping the streets, and you've got to get people singing once again. Everybody's singing, because every culture has folk songs. Every culture has spirituals. They're white spirituals, of course, from Appalachia and so on. So what we're going to do, the Schiller Institute, the Foundation, the Harlem Opera Theater, is on June 29th, which would have been the centenary of Sylvia Olden Lee. We are going to do a major concert at Carnegie Hall in the large auditorium. So I want to extend an invitation to everyone here to be there to help us actually to build the concert, and let us build it with non-traditional audiences, and audiences that begin to lift their voices and sing. So that's our request, and I want to know what other ideas you might have in terms of reviving and expanding culture overall, of which, as Roland Hayes and Bill Warfield said, the spirituals call that, black music. This was integral. It belonged on the stage with the songs that they were singing. It wasn't something separate. It was one of the same thing in terms of the principles.
Ellie,
Yes, thank you so much for that comment and information. And I wanted to let everyone know that Dr. Marty Newland is here. Marty, I mentioned you in the Burley Society right before you walked in, but this is Dr. Newland. And I wanted to ask you, Marty, if you would maybe talk about how you came up with the idea for starting a Burley Society in 2017. So what's the impetus for having this, and what is it going to do? And maybe could you talk a little bit about the March 31st concert as well?
Thank you, Ellie, and to everyone for this fantastic event. I'm very happy to represent the Burley Society here today. The Society came about through a collaboration with a friend and colleague who was a member of St. George's Church and also has a connection in Onteora, New York, where Jeanette Thurber lived and where Dvořák summered when he was here in the country. And those personal connections that we talked about in collaboration with my own work as a singer and scholar of African American art music brought us to want to advance Burley studies through research and performance, and to offer a platform to mobilize his work in ways similar to what's happening here, but with a specificity to his life and work in particular. So on Friday, March 31st, we'll have our first event. It will be at St. George's Church, and it is a tribute to an annual service of Negro spirituals that Burley held there starting in 1924, that was held for over 20 years. And then revived in the 1980s. It hasn't been done now for over 30 years and will happen again. We will be featuring Gene Snyder and Randy Jones. We'll also have performances of Burley's art songs and his spirituals, of course. And there will also be members of St. George's Church who sang with Burley in his children's choir, who will reflect on their personal relationship with him and his artistry. BurleySociety.com is the website. You can also find us on Twitter and Facebook.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you, Ellie.
I also want to mention, you mentioned it yourself. yourself, but that, we've been talking about Burley entirely in terms of his work on spirituals. And, anyone who works on Dvořák has to encounter the notion that Dvořák is only really being himself and most authentic when he's doing something Czech, which is clearly not true. He does many different kinds of things, and so does Burley. And I've been playing through recently Burley's solo piano pieces and his pieces for violin and piano as well, that are really extraordinary works that are, and not played very often. So I think it's a wonderful opportunity with the Society to bring not only the works he's known for, but works, lesser known works of his. Because you know how it works, right? Everybody says, there's a body of work and everybody says, okay, these are the greatest hits. But then somebody comes along and says, well, you haven't looked at that one yet. And you haven't looked at that one yet. And that's part of the fun, so we're looking forward to that. I think we probably, maybe one or two more questions and then we better quit. So I guess, okay, I'll get you, I promise I'll get you.
Hi, my name is Ron Gray. Thank you so much for this panel. It was really amazing. I'm an immigrant, a French horn and cello player who grew up on Dvořák. And came here and studied Manhattan School of Music for a while before becoming a music teacher in Harlem after doing a bit of outreach. So the my horn teacher is now at the Met and was at the Phil. And this problematization of a lot of those various aspects of that story and the sort of growing up on the music of another culture, then reinterpreted through classical music that you do have, I think, I can be honest, to sort of some degree of exoticism attraction to. But it's been really heartening to see that conversation play out with such a respectful and assumption of good faith in a time when I think very similar conversations are being had between different modes of progressive political discourse and struggle, and that level of good faith is not normally seen, and it does inheed kinds of conversations, so it was really lovely to be able to have those kinds of complicated conversations move on. My question is, I work now as a lawyer working with kids on issues of inequality and austerity, and I worked at Americans for the Arts beforehand, working on their macroeconomic strategy, how to get more money, which, as we're talking about now, is not going too well. At that time, they were very, very big on people like Robert Redford being the face of the organization, sort of getting some social capital, sort of having these sort of Obama 2012 YouTube videos where there's a face of everyone that everyone can recognize. And I got a strain out of this conversation of sort of almost different political tactics about how to advance the representation interests of minorities in the arts. And it seemed like, on one hand, these people who did have a lot of social capital through whatever sort of circumstance of their life then turned around and used that to do good things, but at the same time it seems like what we're seeing today is maybe the sort of bankruptcy of that model as a mode of political change and the need to not rely on heroes like that to lift whole cultures. So I just wanted to see if that was the sort of take on this conversation that you thought was close to accurate, or if you thought that
Well, no, I agree completely. I think that's one of the things that we're wondering about is that someone like Dvořák and others have been treated as heroes, and it's not that they don't have a heroic dimension, and it's not that anyone's trying to in any way denigrate them, but looking at things in a kind of objective way as a series of tensions and clashes with possible problems, rather than immediately valorizing them and making them seem as if they're automatically good things without really probing them. Because if you believe that, then you investigate in a different way, and you see not only, as they say, I mean, we all are historians. We know, whatever you set out to find, that's what you find. So you better be pretty careful about how you go about your investigations. And with someone like Dvořák, again, it's all been a positive story, and but we haven't asked tough questions. Maurice is right. It's all about appropriation. Everybody knows it, but nobody writes about it. And so I think it's important to do that. And I think maybe we can have the best of both worlds, where we can really honor and admire people like Dvořák or like Mildred Hill, who advanced certain positions when they were deeply unpopular and took risks that they didn't have to take by any means, while at the same time not putting them on certain kinds of pedestals and looking honestly at how they thought, rather than imposing our thoughts on them. So I yes, Maurice.
I'm optimistic. I'm a half full, the glass half full person. I've been that all my life. I think this symposium, for example, and the conversations going on in America now about the history of the ethnic history of our country and the black underpinning of our country, they're very healthy. It's really coming now. I'm an old man, and I've seen, and I used to go to Florida with my parents, and black people had to get off the island of Miami, when the sun came down. And on the train going down, all the black people, I've seen this horrible part of our history, but I feel a much more optimistic moment now. The films being made, the plays being written, the power and the I'm overwhelmed by the crying out and the anger of our so-called minority community, and I'm also overwhelmed by the non-minority community feeling quite. How can we change ourselves? Yeah, you go to the film and you're very impressed, and I feel, oh my God, I went to an all-black film and I feel good about myself. No, that ain't the idea. What we're now feeling is, what can I do? What kind of conversation? Where can I go to help this thing, to end this thing? It's going to be a long time, to end it. But I do think we're at a point where there's a turnaround. That's my sense. There's a turnaround in the whole question of race in America.
Okay, 2 more questions, and then I think we. Oh, sorry.
Okay. Just a quickie.
Okay.
This is just a quickie. I wanted to make a comment apropos of what you're saying. A very good friend of mine and my singing teacher, she's no longer alive, Billy Frierson. She was one of the winners of the Metropolitan Opera Nationals. This is back in the 60s. And I asked her why she never pursued it to get to perform at the Met, and she said, well, Leonard Price was there. They can only take one.
Maybe not.
Oh, at the time. But her husband, Andy Frierson, sang more porgies than anybody.
That's something that I think we have to be careful of regarding your question. So we could just convene around a big boardroom table, and say, well, one way to solve this problem is to just program, a lot of porgies and a lot of Aidas. And so Carmen is acceptable because she's lascivious, and that fits in with our imagery of black women, so that's fine too, and that takes care of it. So I think that that's something to keep in mind. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Lynn Yan, and I'm the executive director of the Foundation for the Revival of Classical Culture, and we're the ones doing the tribute to Sylvia Odom Lee on June 29th. I want to make a comment about why we do a lot of outreach into the public schools in New York City, and actually I brought classical musicians into the public schools in New York City because there's absolute lack of music in schools today, in middle school and high school, and this was comments that were given to me and observations I made in the past few years, which is that you have 1,600 public schools in New York City, 90% of which really have no music. You've got a few of the performing arts schools, but then there's only 60% that even have a music teacher in the school. And then you have this thing of, 1 year of music appreciation for 4 years of middle school and high school. And that's really nothing. So as a Chinese person, when I asked for a piano at the age of 7, my mom gave it to me. And most Chinese and Asian parents make an effort to make their children learn music. But today in America, the majority of young people have no access to the greatest music that has been made available to the Western civilization, through the Western civilization. And that is a crime. And I think that's one of the reasons that you don't see all that many black people at the Met, at the Philharmonics, because they don't have the access to practice and be given this music. We announced an initiative on June 15th, on Dr. King's birthday, during a concert that we performed with the Schiller Institute, that we want to organize, we want hundreds of musicians and teachers to teach tens of thousands of young people to sing the spirituals and freedom songs that are America's contribution to the world's classical music. And that's one of the things that needs to be done today, I think. And I would like to in my comments, and I think anything else from the panel to see any, because we would love to have more people and institutions to collaborate on that effort.
Thank you so much. Unless there's a quick comment from anybody, I think we're like many good basketball games. We are in overtime, and we can certainly talk about many of these questions afterwards informally. So I want to close this now and thank the panel very much for their participation.